Collected that?
How much fee in lieu have we collected?
Not 550,000. Short of that.
So this is
It's all
the
just in
additional
general fund,
ask on
so
top of
That's
it.
correct.
it's not specific in its own bucket.
Okay.
We wanna let you know it's there, but here again, what do you even do with the money?
All right, so these next 4 slides, again, it doesn't have to be done this way. I lumped them all into one project, which is detention basin landscaping. There's 4 of them I wanted to bring up. One's Shoshone, second one's in Antelope Meadows, which is off 7300. Range East, also in the 7300 West area, and then Jensen Place off 7300 as well. So we would anticipate getting one contractor to do all this, but like I said, we can award separately and take these by priority. I've listed them in order of priority.
How does this fall into the, so are these intended to fall into a park type scenario, or are these just?
No, these are just detention only. So this is meant for flood control. It's a flood control
So
facility.
when we say when we're saying landscape, what exactly would that entail?
So, and we don't know 100%, typically
Not
turf.
buried in weeds.
Yeah, that's right. So right now it's just weeds.
So it's just a
This
grass
is
field,
grass and-
basically, that neighbor's
Yep.
gonna take advantage of.
Yep, so just turf. And this one here is Antelope Meadows. You can see my aerial's a little dated. This has been completed since, but it's on off 7300 West. It's off Wild Coleman Circle. And then the third one is in the Range East, off of Sagegrass Lane. And then the last one is Jensen Place. This one's right off of 7300 West.
I always wonder
Next to
if
Hall
that's
Crossing.
like a change from weeds to anything.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Now, Heritage Hill asphalt replacement for the first portion of it. This is the main trunk line coming into the development. We propose a construct full depth replacement. This is based on a visual and based on our best estimation. We do have, Justin, remind me the name of our consultants helping us take surveys of the roads. IMS. We're doing a survey of all the roads and take a look, and we'll compare this recommendation with their recommendation as well, but we anticipate this will require full depth replacement. Needless to say, it's an old road that needs some attention.
Those surveys, like core samples?
It's like they scanned it, like a big scanner, and they drove it, and then they also will pound it
Okay.
and take a look at its rigidity. And then the public works yard fence, this here is to propose to put some additional fencing in this area. Also, this got some benefit here from the water group as well, so they anticipate to participate in the cost as well. All right, Juniper Crest Road landscaping. There's, I don't remember, I think it's about 20 or 30 feet of open space behind the back of curb that's on the south and west side of Juniper Crest that we are obligated to install and maintain. So what we're proposing here is that these funds would be for the design and development of the construction drawings for that.
But we're already obligated to that anyways.
Yes.
So, an opposite as far as waterway stuff, I know it's sometimes more costly with doing rocks, is what you said, versus sod, but when you consider we have a very
Right.
finite resource with water,
Yep.
please make sure that gets considered.
And necessarily.
Well, good point. And maybe something I would put a clarification to is, we found in the past that gravel and turf, you would think gravel would be less expensive. It ends up being pretty comparable to just turf. What becomes expensive is when you integrate them both together. You have to, it's a little more of a complicated irrigation system, and we find that's where the roof goes up. But if we did just a water-wise, you're right, so there would be an attenuated cost in future in perpetuity that we would need
Looked
to.
into the, grant program Jordan Valley was talking about for those sorts of things.
Yes, good point.
I've just been involved with that over the last couple of months.
I just think that we had that discussion with that presentation, I think they're responsible of us not to implement that type of design and stuff in what we as a city can control.
Agreed.
We're also planning a fairly wide asphalt path through this area that will take up a lot of the landscaping area, so
It's water-wise.
that is water-wise.
Is this, you said it was about a 30-foot?
You know what, I should probably recant that. I don't know off the top of my head what that open space is, but I need to figure out what that
Is this
actually
the one where
This is the last section of the road.
I think 100
Right of way.
you kept the right of way but decreased the
106
actual-
foot right away. I think there's 106 or 116 foot right away, whereas I think the 90 feet is what was installed.
So this is essentially landscaping to help preserve that right of way.
Yes.
Yes.
Then right there where it ends, the road goes to.
Bigger.
The full length road.
Right.
So this section that connects to Mountain View is narrow.
Okay.
Port Rockwell landscaping, you guys have probably driven past this.
So with that in mind, I figured I would rip this landscaping out and put a road in, so don't spend.
Just keep it low, all water, all asphalt.
Get the grant.
Just make a wide asphalt.
So what I'm hearing is if it would have just been asphalt from the start. I digress.
When this was installed, now what we're proposing here is installation of landscaping along the median only. We anticipate, well, there are conduits and there's stubs that exist, but we also anticipate needing to check to make sure that those are in good enough condition that they can be utilized. So there's a bit of a wild card on how much that will cost. But when we estimated, assuming all was good, it was, I wanna say, $100,000 to $200,000. All right.
Be careful with that one, because it is the main entrance into the city, and will be very critical for people coming in to games and other things, so.
All right, Justin, maybe you can speak to this a little bit.
Yeah, so I can give you a little update on where we're at right now. So if you remember, the council gave staff budget to go out and begin the pre-design and design of the public works and public safety facilities.
So we got a nod a year ago,
Right. And then
which we put in the budget, and then you approved the budget in June.
And so we're moving down both paths on public safety and public works building. Public safety building is probably about 2 months ahead of the public works building. We're in the programming and schematic phase of the public safety building. And the public works yard, we're going through the RFP process, and we'll be getting proposals back within the next couple weeks.
I will tell you, we had about 40 people show up for that pre-meeting.
Proposal meeting.
Got a great response.
There's a lot of interest. And so this is just letting you know that that's where we're at, and then obviously, once we get through the design phases, then obviously we'll have some potential for construction in that fiscal year of 2021, so. Obviously, we don't know what the cost will be, because we haven't got through design yet.
Okay, we'll jump to the transportation projects. Transportation impact fee projects. These come off of our impact fee facility plan or our master plan. And we're currently updating that, so what gets said here will kind of influence how those go on the master plan. As we ranked them, the 6400 West roadway improvements came up to the top of our list. This is just the design, so this would be money to design it. The reason it's up on the top of our list is the transmission power lines that run along the east side of the road. They the design really needs to stay away from those. If we hit one of those poles with our design, Rocky Mountain Power has to move it per our franchise agreement on their dime, but the design of those transmission facilities takes about a year. And then they take about six to 12 months to move it. So if we do the design, we're still probably 2 years if we have to move a pole. And I'm anticipating there's a good chance of having to move a pole at the intersection, because that is where it gets tight with the angle.
Can I just, can I ask a question? Why do we have, that's not Juniper Crest Road, correct?
I'm really confused as to what.
My mind just got twisted right in half. I'm trying to.
I was looking at the north.
That was the first exam question to make sure I was awake. That is Main Street.
I didn't hear a word you said because I've been looking at this map going, where the crap is this?
Herman Highway. In another language, that's what
Oh my gosh.
I was scared of maps on.
Because I saw this and I was like, I did too, and I was like, maybe they,
Well, see,
maybe they
I
renamed it.
actually read the words next to it that said Main Street.
There's a zoom in on that, and it's got the.
The rest of us just look at
Everybody,
pictures.
as you all know, we've had a lot of interest by residents emailing council on this intersection, so.
It's
This
It is,
dangerous.
It's
it's
a
correct.
challenging intersection.
Yeah.
This one rose to the top as well, because if we get funded, the county is on the schedule to install this next summer. So that's why the design's up at the top, because we'd like to design it all, and then get in, do our improvements to this intersection, and then install the signal while we're doing it.
Solid County still sees the most reasonable on costing,
Still trying to untwist my
to
brain.
these in, but that's why they're almost a year out now, getting on their schedule. Everybody wants them.
They asked for the 2-year schedule, and I gave it to them a year ago, and this one was on that. So they'll be coming to me really soon for the next 2-year schedule. And so the traffic signal and the road improvements we're estimating are gonna be about $300,000 for this. And, it may require some right-of-way acquisition, it may require some Rocky Mountain Power pole moving, so we could possibly put the signal up and not move the pole and have it pushed back to later. We just gotta get into the
That's where those
design.
big steel transmission poles.
Those poles have the transmission line, which we can't bury on the top of them. And the lower arms have the distribution lines, which we could bury, but the cost to bury those would be borne by the city. And then I think there is, communications on the bottom of that, so these poles carry a lot of utilities on them. So those are the
They'll
two.
move them for nothing per our agreement, but if you wanna bury it, it's gonna be
You pay
the
the
cost
excess.
difference between overhead and underground.
Okay, the next one on the list, 6,000 West. This one rose up high. We're calling this 6,000 West Phase 1. And this would be the design. We've got a piece of this already designed with this development, but we'd have to tie onto that and design the rest of this. This one kind of lines up with a few other impact fee funds. There's a storm drain that has to run down this. So we'd have to, I guess just one other, the storm drain. So it could be a cost share with the storm drain impact fees, the transportation impact fees, and then another funding source on this is the sewer district has to install a new sewer line. So the stars kind of align with this one, that the sewer district can help pay for some of the asphalt, the storm drain can pay for some of the asphalt, and the transportation fee can pay for the curb gutter and everything. And so this would be curb gutter sidewalk. This also requires some utility relocation, but it's the distribution side of Rocky Mountain Power, which is much easier to move. We've already worked with them to get the cost to underground the north piece, because the developer, when they came in, paid the upsize cost. So, item number 4, 7,300 West. We're also calling this Phase 1, 7,400 West. Just a little bit south of Hall Crossing Drive, that subdivision on the west side of the road is called Jensen Place. So from the south end of Jensen Place to Harriman Main Street, this is still a rural section for portions of it, and then other portions of this road have the full curb gutter sidewalk, streetlights improvements on them. So this one also benefits from having some projects going on with it, the water impact fee, the water projects, the storm drain projects, so it's kind of a cost share between the buckets of money. This one's the last one in the transportation one, and this is because we're not sure what's going on with the Automall property and everything, but we need to be ready to have the design done for this piece of road. So this one's on there, but it's on the bottom of the recommended list. And
They're on the hook to design and build this, and so before we have the deal, that was twice there, so this will probably drop off.
step forward. Okay. Jump to the storm drain projects. This is my favorite one. This is ranking right up there with McHouston.
Move along, please.
Last one. This may change, but we just wanted to put this in the budget. It's already in the budget, but we want to make sure it's carried over in the next year. And then subject to change on alternatives that we're developing right now. Number 2 is Midas Creek outfall. This would be up to the Automall portion. We'll be looking at taking there's an open house next week for Dingo's Dog Park. We're gonna take that pond that's there and remove it and run the water up this way. And there'd be some detention along here that we would modify the UDOT pond and then have another pond here that would capture all the detention. This also relieves a detention basin down here by the Maverick, by Legacy Ranch, and allows us to do some more flows and take some risk out of that pond down there, because that one is a retention pond as well. It doesn't have an outfall. And so we haven't got an estimate on this. There's a lot of stuff, but those are the 2 storm drain projects that we have on our list right now. With that, jump over to Justin on the water projects.
So we're gonna cover both impact and enterprise fund projects here. First are the impact fee. So you're all, I think, familiar with the plans for East Harriman, the water infrastructure we need to do over there. We went out to RFP, we have an engineer on board now. And so we're beginning design on this project, and so that includes 2 water tanks and a pump station that will pump to 2 different zones. And so we're estimating the cost of what previous projects have cost to be about $11.7 million to do the entire project. And then here we have this extension. This is in anticipation of some development that's happening down south of Porter Rockwell and along Redwood Road. We have water supply there, but it's from Bluffdale. We have an agreement with them. But that sunsets, we had it 10 years, and I think we're about the 7th or 8th year in that right now. And so we need to start anticipating how we're going to handle that. So this is in that project. The water system that we just saw, the main infrastructure, will serve that pipeline. And so it's just lining up. We'll try and do both of those around the same time.
So you're almost 14 million between those 2.
Correct. Juniper Canyon, so you see there's multiple water lines through this area. They're constructing the stormwater pond right now, the dam. You've probably seen it in Juniper Canyon. Well, as part of that project, when they go in and begin building some of the trails and things, we're gonna install these water lines. We have a portion of it in this year's budget, and then we'll have a portion, we're just thinking it's going to span 2 budget years. So we've already budgeted for a portion of it in this year, and then there'll be a portion of these projects that will be the next year we anticipate through the construction year. Danzy Boulevard, in anticipation of the development that's happening there, we will be building a small section of it from here down to about here in the next, with this first phase of projects. And then the rest of that will go through the Ivory development as they continue to build. And we're just anticipating that happening, so we're adding that to our project list. Old Town improvements, we have some impact fee eligible money in Old Town, because there have been some developable lots that have begun developing there, and so that's new infrastructure and new development demands, and so, we went through and we've done a design for all of the needs in Old Harriman. We're wrapping that design up now, and then anticipating spending some of this money over the next several years, so the water enterprise money will be, we're anticipating about $150,000 a year for the next multiple years until we can get through all of Old Town to replace the deficiencies there. And there's only a small portion of that that can be attributable to impact fees, but there is a small portion. 118th South, this is a connection, when we made the connection across Mountain View, now that the water line has been brought down and stubbed to the west side of Mountain View corridor on 100, I guess at the Anthem Park Boulevard, there's a small connection that can be made so that currently this water line that I'm pointing at here east of Mountain View is served by Jordan Valley. What we'd like to do is make a connection to our system so that we're not peaking off of Jordan Valley, but that will still be able to use emergency situations. We'll peak on our tanks, and so we don't have our increased cost at Jordan Valley is based on peaking. And so if we can make that connection, that will offset some of our peaking factor costs when it comes to them determining rates. And some of this is both funds as well, some impact fee and some water enterprise fund. And so these are enterprise fund projects that really don't fit on the map. But there's a number of them here. Meter repair and replacement program, that's one of those that we have aging meters and we just have to continually replace those. That's a larger item. But we're also adding in the AMI metering system that was approved in this year's budget. And it was about $120,000 to upfront cost that. There is some possibility that when they go and put antennas up, we might have some areas that don't pick up signal very well, so we may have to go and install some additional towers to pick that, and that's what that $40,000 is anticipating. So that may be needed or may not. SCADA system upgrades. Our first SCADA system was installed in early 2003, 2004. We're just looking to upgrade some of those pump stations and well sites one at a time as we can get funding. And so that will be an ongoing cost as well. Arnold Hollow Spring, we're in the design of this project right now. There's some legs of the collection system that we'd like to improve, and so that's the cost that we're anticipating there. That is in this current year's budget, but depending on weather and when our contractor can get in there once we get the bid done, we may not be able to get it done in this fiscal year, so we're anticipating possibly rolling it over. Well for rehabilitation. This is an old well, 1970s it was constructed in, and this is going in to see if we can improve water quality and improve the production of that well to see if we can get some increased yield. Well 3, which is near this one, will be happening through the fall and winter of this year. And then, didn't want to change it. So we're looking at some future wells in different parts of the city, and I want to do a feasibility study. There's some existing wells that I want to go and investigate to see if they're a viable option to the city to be able to pump water. There's 2 locations that I'm looking at, and so this would be to do a feasibility study on both of those, see what water rights are there, and do some investigation on the well logs and things like that. And then Rose Crest Booster Pump Station, I'm receiving bids on this right now to do some upgrades. This is built in 2004. The pumps are reaching their useful life, and we'd like to make some modifications when we go in and do the replacement of those pumps. And so we're not quite sure what the cost will be. This is a project that may be in next year, anticipating we'll have all of that information before we go through the budget process. And then the secondary expansion areas. This is just as we go into areas similar to what we did in Heritage. When we add secondary to an area that has existing infrastructure, we have to go through and do upgrades on meter boxes because they've been damaged and things like that. And so this is in anticipation of those areas. So that's it for water projects. You want to cover these ones, Wendy?
No, you can do it.
I don't think I'd do you any favors.
Well, since they drilled geology, water, and stormwater, let's get to fun section, right?
Did that earlier,
Don't need it.
finance.
All right, let's see. Jonathan was kind enough to put all these slides together for us, so I want to just thank him for his hard work. He put a lot together so we can work on other things. So these are just park impact fees that we are anticipating for 2020, 2021. Of course, these will come back to you in the budget process, but we wanted to kind of update you on what we're thinking, we're looking at for the next fiscal year. Juniper Canyon Recreation Area, we've been talking about this for a while now. Phase 1 improvements is what we're looking at to start. We anticipate it being a 2-year process for Phase 1. As you all know, we were recommended for funding from the county in the amount of $1.1 million to get this project started, which was really exciting.
Good job.
Thank you. It was it's gonna be a good partnership. This does qualify as a regional park in the county master plan, and so they were really excited that we were taking the lead on this and working with them to get some of these projects done. This is a very unique project that I've become pretty passionate about, and it's very low maintenance, which is good because we're not mowing grass, we're not we're not having a lot of irrigation. So long term, I think this is a really good project for us to focus on. Also, it'll be a big regional draw and a transportation system, active transportation system for people on the east side of Mountain View to the west side of Mountain View, and give people some really fun opportunities for outdoor recreation. So phase 1 is to include design, construction management services, the trailhead in a rudimentary fashion, not the blown up trailhead that has been presented to you all before. It's basically the parking lot, restrooms, and pavilions. Just to get things started, a 10-foot wide asphalt path, 6 play nodes, dam improvements, and restroom. So you see that there. So the total estimate for this project was just over $3.7 million just for phase 1. And we anticipate this area being 3 or 4 phases depending on funding. And also we'd like to kind of see how people use the area. So we're kind of starting slow and seeing how people interact with the area and see how things move throughout the area. And then as we move on, we can add the additional phases as needed. So of the $3.7 million, we've secured just over $2.2 million, either through developer contributions or our grant that we were awarded. And in addition, we're counting the property that we purchased as part of the trailhead, as part of that $2.2 million. So we're about $1.5 million short right now. I'm gonna go after 2 more funding opportunities in spring. And so I'm hoping to get another $500,000 to $750,000 towards this project. And then we'll come to you in the budget process for whatever the gap is there. So just keep an eye on that one.
Those dam improvements are expensive.
Dam improvements are expensive. But it's gonna be the best dam you've ever seen.
Best dam improvements we've ever made.
Right, that's right. The second big project is the Danzy Home Restoration and Open Space. This is about a 5-acre piece of open space that's out at Hidden Oaks. I'm still waiting to get my estimates from the mason. He hasn't sent those over to me yet. We've already talked about the retaining wall and talking to the developer of that project. They think that we could do a boulder wall for a lot cheaper, so we're gonna explore that with them. And then we know we have about $12,000 to $15,000 in asbestos removal that we need to have professionally removed from the home, which was a lot better than I thought we were gonna end up with. But as a whole, it went to sleep.
It's tired.
It's tired.
That was
It
a lot of
talking.
projects.
I feel it's pain.
Oh, the projector turned off. So anyway, we're looking at moving the cabins there, having a historical area. We can talk about the name and what we want to name it. I don't anticipate it being called the Danzy Historical Area. I anticipate it being Harriman Historical Area or something tagged to Harriman. But this is another project that I've really really excited about. I think that it's a really unique opportunity for us to preserve some of the history of Harriman. 1 second. And I also, when I was down in St. George at the Utah Outdoor Recreation Conference, I had a chance to talk with the State Office of History. I don't know what the official title is, but they're also very excited about this project. So there are some grant opportunities through them as well. So we'll start putting some packages together on this and try to make it something really unique for our area. Yes, Brett?
Wake up.
Well, I'd just like to see on the map, or maybe it's dropped off, the possibility of that, monument markers on the south side of the road there.
Yes.
Just remind council that that was made out of old rock, that was part of Old Rock Church. So I've been kind of sensitive about, we don't lose that, I know it's gonna be a problem moving it, but I just wanna make sure it's on your radar.
That's gonna be a really interesting move. The cabin was interesting, but that one's gonna be even more interesting because it is just stone and concrete and it's heavy and big and we're gonna have to crane it over, so.
The Danzies have told me how big a footing and concrete, but you go look at it, I want you to look at it. The mortar on that was like I just put it just a year ago.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I've been amazed on how good the concrete looks.
So yeah, that will be part of the project as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions about, those are the two big ones. We may see some trails pop in depending on our trail plan and where the Trails Committee gets funding from. So we'll probably have a few of those in there as well. Oh, there's pictures. Here's the Dancy house.
I appreciate on both of these projects, honestly, the vision that you've had on them, because I think that they're gonna be awesome projects too.
I do too. I think I love it. I think we really need to tie in our historical committee with this too. I've talked to different Danby families. There's so many stories that are associated with this
So
stuff.
fun.
It should be built into a book, something that we can, markers that we can display different stories and facts and stuff. I think it will be good.
Yep.
That's it.
Thanks, JB.
That's Brett.
Ready to talk about general plan?
So I've been trying to warn our consultant on the general plan, and I think she's a few minutes away yet. I know that we've got Y2 Analytics here, and you're part of that presentation.
Yes, I think Susie was
Yeah.
planning on kicking things off and
Yeah.
then turning it over to me, so.
Yeah, I thought your presentation was gonna
Just
go
to let
longer.
you know, Michael, because we had a census, we're gonna get bumped today, because
Yeah.
all things were added into the closed door, but, I think your light lunch will be here about noon, so we might have to just pause for a moment, let you get it, and two, while we're having a conversation about general plan. And like I said before the council, I think we should, before we get diving into our conversation, I think we better cut it off and start fresh on that another board meeting.
That's yours.
You get us rubber bands.
I want that on your refrigerator.
Will you get rubber bands for us?
Yeah. Yeah. Remember that? Yeah.
Next now.
So that we don't have to sit all day.
I don't want you to.
Sorry, what are we doing? Are we jumping into Tammy's portion of it, or what are we doing?
I think it's like that's how
We could start with Y2, if you want. You have a
Happy to.
presentation,
I
right?
do, yes.
Okay.
So we'll start on the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not here, rather have the hard stuff. You should have. She might have none in there. So we're waiting for you guys to figure out what we want.
Okay.
I say that as I'm about to.
You have a thumb drive or?
I don't. Yeah, I have an adapter, so if you have HDMI, I can just plug it in.
Do you have any with vitamins? Actually, I double up on my sugars. Any Kit Kats with vitamins? Enriched, these are enriched.
Rich, I'm gonna have one of the peanut butter things. I know it's got
9 essential
lots of
minerals and
protein in it.
vitamins, lots of protein. And peanut butter, processed peanut butter can be bad for you.
Exactly. And chocolate.
That's why they process it, to get rid of all the bad stuff. That's why they process it.
It's just to get all the shells and stuff.
Yeah.
That's the process.
That's processing. And I like white chocolate the best because it's the best for you.
No, dark chocolate is.
In my world, white chocolate's the best for you.
Just
let
live
me
in
get
his own realm.
My apologies.
Mr.
All right.
Canvas.
I'll just dive into the survey results here, and then let Susie take over as soon as she arrives to talk more in depth about the implications of the survey results here for the general plan update. But starting at a high level with just a few key findings, a majority of residents report that they currently live in single-family homes with some variance in yard or lot size. And most of those residents expect to be living in the same type of home they live in now in the next 10 years. I think there are a lot of conceptions or notions that residents expect to downsize, and in Harriman that doesn't seem to be the case. In fact, quite the opposite.
When you say single-family homes, are those single-family detached homes? Or
So-
those single-family owner homes?
That's a great question. I think single-family detached, and we had a few different lot size options for those. I can pull that up really quickly if that's helpful. But when it comes to townhomes or courtyard sort of arranged group housing, that was categorized separately. Yeah. Second here, about half of residents say the type of housing they will need in 10 years is currently available in the city. And the other half of residents who say it's not available right now, the majority of those residents would like to see that housing available. So there's a sense that residents who are here want to stay here. 50% of residents.
Can I ask you,
Yeah, go
just
ahead.
real quick, I don't know if you'll get into it later, but did they, if it's not available here, did they specify what that housing type is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. And I'm happy to, we have the cross-tabulated results broken out as well, and Susie has those, so if there are specific sort of deep dive questions, we can look into those
Okay,
after.
thank you.
Yep. So third, about half of residents say that restaurants are the most desirable gathering place. So whether that's the place that they gather at most currently, or the place that they would like to see more of in the city. And most residents think commercial developments would not fit well in their neighborhood, but there is appetite to see them somewhere in the city, so not a lot of surprises there either.
Steve, are you surprised?
I'm shocked.
Yeah. Next, 8 out of 10 residents say that they prefer to use a car for transportation. Almost half of residents say that they would consider using bus or rail if there were convenient accessibility options. So if there were a park and ride lot, or if it were within a 5 to 10 minute walk from their homes.
If it existed.
Yeah, so this is all prospective, so if it were available in the city. And then finally here, 80% of residents say that they would be interested in having farmers markets in the city. 55% expressed interest in a food festival. So we asked about some potential events that could take place here.
Then you need to ask how we would spend that money versus.
Fair. Before we dive into the meat of things here, quick review of survey methodology. So the respondents to this survey were sampled from our previously recruited resident panel, so we had good geographic and demographic distribution throughout the city. Our original sampling frame was all registered voters in the city and supplemented with utility customers, and that list was provided by city staff to make sure that we had as much coverage as possible. The survey was about 11 minutes long. It fielded for about 2 weeks, and we had an excellent response rates. We had 898 of our 1,800 panelists respond. That gives us a 50% response rate, which feels pretty good. Each email address could respond only once, so all of these are individual responses from residents. And that all gives us about a 3 percentage point margin of error on either side of these estimates. This is a quick look of the geographic distribution of respondents broken out by council district. You can see we have pretty even distribution by council district, a little fewer in District 2, a little more in District 4.
Was the originals, I don't know what we call it, sample,
Mhm.
was it also really balanced?
Yeah.
We had a pretty equal weight of.
Yeah, the
districts.
original sort of panel recruitment effort, we ensured that we were balanced across all 4 council districts.
Interesting.
So getting into the survey questions themselves, so we asked residents which, if any, of the following characteristics define the Harriman feel, and allowed them to select up to 3 of these things. So there are some pretty clear clusterings, but the most frequently selected descriptor was family friendly. Quiet neighborhoods, beautiful vistas. are also commonly selected descriptors of Harriman. And then sort of third tier here, access to open space and trails, biking, hiking, and being active outdoors, livable, walkable neighborhoods. So all of these really active outdoor community and, of course, again, family-friendly neighborhoods. Pretty positive descriptions overall here. And then we get to some of the rural, peaceful, more niche characteristics that I think we've seen residents, particularly longtime residents, really cling to.
Maybe before you move on, I'm curious, does the top survey results resonate with our council? Does that, I felt the same way when I saw this. I thought, that's exactly what I've been feeling coming to the city over the last 2 years.
One of the questions that Susie specifically asked that we include was, what does a live, work, play neighborhood in Harriman look like to you? And so this was an open-ended question. We had a lot of varied responses, but one of the characteristics that's particularly important is access to parks and recreation. That's really important for what determines a live, work, play atmosphere. That said, many Harriman residents expressed opinions along the lines of, they don't want a live, work, play neighborhood. They want those aspects of their lives to be distinctly separate. So I like not working too close to where I live. Or I don't want to work where I live and play. That's why I chose to live in Harriman. So these are important characteristics, I think, to keep in mind.
This live work play thing honestly is pretty irritating to me at this point, because it's not possible. It doesn't exist. Like, quit trying to force it on people.
The what?
Live work play.
The live work
You
play.
can't work where you live. It's not, we have no employment centers out.
Looking at some housing and development specific preferences or statistics. So again, we asked residents what type of home they live in now, and 14% of residents say that they would, or classify where they live as a single family home with a large yard. 47% of residents would classify their home as a single family with a medium yard, and 27% say that they live in a single family home with a small yard. 11% of residents said that they lived in some other type of residence, including townhomes, apartments, duplexes, tri- and fourplexes, and senior housing. So,
Does that compare to the actual demographic of housing stock in our community?
so I was looking at the zoning map and wondered the same thing, actually. So it looks to me like that's probably accurate and that residents are assessing things the same way that the city has zoned things, but in terms of the multifamily residential development, I don't know how many units are there, so I don't know how many responses I would expect to classify that way.
Because to me, that number looks really like a third of what it probably should.
Really?
Yeah, when we've gone through and done our counts, because we've gone through and done the actual counts of units, I would expect it to be, well, at least double what that is there for who's. So for me, that gives me some slight concern that we missed that demographic a little bit.
So I think you're probably right. We did sample renters. They respond at lower rates.
Sure.
And so despite our waiting to try and match city demographics, we were lower on the renter proportion of the city.
Do we have a statistically valid sample of renters that we can pull that information out separately and view their opinions
We have
separately?
a small sample of renters, but we can look at that separately.
So it may not be.
It wouldn't be statistically valid. The margin of error around that group would be quite large. But we have a small sample of renters.
Because I think we had talked about that it was, like, the survey was 95.5 and really we're at
The city is
80-20, so,
80-20.
yeah.
But it
But
does
those are
definitely show that people want to move up.
Yeah, so that's the key point that I would take from this actually is regardless of where the actual housing distribution is, even among those who live in a single family home with a small yard, there's a sense that in the future they'd like to live in a single family home with a large yard. And I think, again, that kind of goes counter to the notion that people expect to downsize and 10 years is a little bit more of a narrow window. Maybe in 10 years, most of the residents here would like to be in a house with a larger yard, more room to grow, and then maybe 50 years after that, it's time to downsize. So I think there are some sensitivities to the window of time that we're asking about, but there is a sense that people still want that house with the yard and the picket fence, and especially here in Harriman, I think that's
Well, in
that's
10 years, our
important.
median age will still be in the 30s, so.
Right.
When it came to the actual, characterization of a large yard, medium yard, was that left up to each individual's own interpretation of what that meant, or was there any parameters given around the definition of what a large yard? Because again, I think some people would say their definition of a large yard and someone else's is completely different.
I would agree with that. We did have some rough parameters. We just simplified things for the visualizations here, so.
So there were some parameters.
There were some guidelines for what classifies as a large yard versus a small yard.
Do you recall what those, just from my own
Not off the
information,
top
do you
of my
remember,
head, I don't
recall what those were?
Yeah, kind of your typical categories, quarter acre, the half acre, larger,
Okay.
third acre. You know, we were trying to approximate kind of the different categories that Harriman uses in its zoning and future land use, so.
Okay.
Looking at these results by council district, and specifically the what type of home you think you'd need 10 years from now, there's a little bit of variation by council district. So District 4 residents are more likely than others to say that they expect to need a single family home with a medium yard rather than a large yard. And District 2 residents are most likely to anticipate living in some type of multifamily or other housing, so townhomes, apartments, duplexes, again, that mix. So we pointed to this earlier, about half of residents, just over half of residents overall, believe that the type of home they will need in 10 years is currently available in the city. And there's a little bit of variation there by council district as well. But then among those residents who don't think it's available now, 9 out of 10 would like to see the type of home that they need in 10 years in Harriman. So yeah, again, that sense that residents who are here would like to stay here and want to see their needs accommodated moving forward.
Which is kind of the narrative I think we've been saying all along, is that people want to stay here, but they also want something to move up to. We can't continue to flood the market with the same types of housing.
I think that's accurate. Looking at potential development, so we have a couple questions here about what would fit well in residents' neighborhoods versus what would not fit well in their neighborhood but would be great to have somewhere in the city. So the things that fit well in residents' neighborhoods, by their own report, peaceful and relaxing places and active areas of engagement were the two that garnered the most support. Social gathering spaces, about a third of residents say that those would fit in their neighborhood. And then once we get into these sort of mixed use or more commercial land uses, we get to a quarter or less support for fitting in their neighborhoods. That said, they would like to see them somewhere in the city. So just about half of residents say that having a small shopping center with multiple stores and restaurants, or a pedestrian mall with stores in a central plaza would be nice to have in the city somewhere, just not their neighborhood.
Why is that question even asked?
So we're trying to decide like where
Because when you say
neighborhood.
your neighborhood, people think about, when you say my neighborhood, I think about my neighborhood with the houses in it. That's my neighborhood. Why none of that fits in my neighborhood? Why are you even asking?
Well, there's some people that it would fit, and that's what we're trying to determine, if there's areas in Harriman where,
Who
you know,
would
right
it-
now the
who would it
neighborhood.
fit? Because anyone responding to this thinks, I mean, when you say your neighborhood, they think of where
Yeah.
they,
Yeah.
their
Well,
house
I
is.
mean, 24% of people are saying, yeah, I think that would fit, and I think when you look at the range of housing types and neighborhoods in Harriman, that there are areas where there's some nodes that are either there or planned. And we're trying to confirm that with the future land use map to make sure that we're still, you know, planning for future areas where nodes might occur that fit with residents' perception. And I think it's not, you know, we're not seeing any like big surprises as far as people that live closer to the town center or in some of those mixed housing type
It's
neighborhoods.
just neighborhood question
Yeah.
seems strange, that word seems strange to me. Because even in my neighborhood, if you ask
Yeah.
my neighbors, would you like to have a grocery store on the opposite opposite kitty corner from our neighborhood, absolutely.
You know, you might be right, Jared, maybe if we had talked about maybe a proximity, like within a quarter mile or a half mile, I think you hit on something. Another reason why we were asking the question is, you know, obviously one of the greatest frustrations that we hear is congestion, our roadways. So if there's a way that we can shorten trips, bring services closer to where we live, is that desirable? And maybe to a degree, we want things to be separate, but in accepting that we have a separate land use, we're gonna have
I
congestion,
think that's the
right?
right way.
So
that's
we're
within a
We're trying to find that balance.
Yeah.
And we have
Yeah.
asked
Within a
like that,
certain
kind of a
radius.
20-minute
Yeah, yeah.
neighborhood.
Yeah.
Because if you ask anybody if you want that in your neighborhood, no, but do you want it?
Yeah, 'cause-
In the kitty corner of that
Right.
vacant lot, yes.
Yeah,
And again, I think,
yeah.
you know, but we are seeing people that are saying yes. And we are also, just to note, the social gathering spaces also included things like the cafe or the restaurant, you know, sort of just the corner restaurant. So that is a much higher response. And so I think it's just the types of things that people feel might fit in their neighborhood. You know, we're getting a range and really, you know, we're just trying to, you know, look at different locations and different types of responses to see, you know, how we can better, you know, update the future land use map to match both the city's aspirations as well as be sensitive to residents and that there's different neighborhoods
Yeah.
in Harriman.
But if we do have another survey that addresses this topic, I think Jared's probably right, we ought to talk more about proximity, so.
Sounds good, thanks, Carrie.
Yeah, no problem, no. And so this is just that same question, which would fit into your neighborhood with the results broken out by council district. So there's a little bit of variation there. District 4, not surprisingly, is particularly interested in active areas of engagement in their neighborhood. District 1 is a little bit more likely to say that social gathering spaces would fit well in their neighborhood. Same goes for corner stores or sort of a neighborhood market type space. And then looking at gathering places specifically, so we asked residents, other than home and work or school, is there a gathering place that you frequently visit or would like to see more of in Harriman? So this is just general appeal of the types of gathering spaces. So cafes and restaurants were number 1. Half of residents say that that's a type of gathering place that they frequent or would like to see more of. A third of residents said parks, 28% said the recreation center or gym, and 25% selected a pub, bar, or beer garden. And then sort of a tapering tail of other potential gathering places after that. And then we looked at just the top responses within each council district here. So there, again, there's a little bit of variation. Cafes or restaurants are most popular across all council districts, but particularly popular among residents of District 3, whereas parks and a pub or beer garden are disproportionately more popular among District 1 residents. So again, a little bit of variation there, and I think maybe some suggestions for potential development or investment in different areas of the city. And then we asked a few questions about transportation and infrastructure. So first, how do you usually get to work, school, or other destinations now? And we asked residents to select all the modes that they currently use. 9 out of 10 residents said that they currently use a car to get where they need to go. And then how would you like to get to work, school, or other destinations in the future? Still 8 out of 10 residents say that they would prefer to use their car, but a third say that they would prefer to have some sort of transit option. 15% would like to use more pedestrian modes, so aspirations to be more active ahead of New Year's resolutions.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at this and seeing that how do those add up to 100%?
You can choose more than one.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a select all that apply.
Good eye.
They don't.
Wow, that's a lot of people taking a
I
car.
think it would be really interesting to know even in our area, not just even in Utah, neighboring states, because my guess is the western half of the United States, you'll see that most people want to use their cars.
Yeah, except for when you get to San Francisco. and
Yeah,
that's where there's
basically
free
until the
transit.
California coast.
But yeah,
Well, and that's in large part to how effective the existing transit system is. And
Right.
right now, we don't have the full solution in place, so it's very inconvenient to use transit, whereas in these, you know, more urban areas where it's all in place, of course, that's a clear option.
I think California, they
Well, and
can't use
people-
their cars, cause if you drive on
And people move out here knowing that that is their only option. I mean, so that's their mindset. To actually go to, I think, you know, a third say that they would like transit as an option, but the honest piece about that is even if and when we get that in place, it's still gonna take a different mindset for
Culture shift.
people, a culture shift to really engage and do that.
Yeah, in New York, you use the subway because if you use your car, it takes you twice as long. Right
It's
now,
not a good option.
right now, it's faster to get on my car than it is to go to all the different
Absolutely.
stops and get there, so it's not.
100%.
Like 3 minutes. It takes my daughter an hour and a half to get to.
We also asked residents to
transit.
evaluate
On
the
transit,
safety of streets in Harriman for pedestrian activity, so for walking and or biking. Most residents across all council districts say that Harriman streets are quite safe for pedestrians. Those residents in District 3 are particularly prone to believe that the streets are safe. Fewer than 10% say that they are very unsafe in any district. We asked residents which, if any, of the following changes to the streetscapes of Harriman they would be interested in seeing to facilitate a more enjoyable or safer walking or biking experience. The most popular potential improvements were multi-use sidewalks wide enough for both bikes and pedestrians, more streetlights, and more bike lanes, and then improved signage at crosswalks and intersections. After that, we get about a quarter support for the additional improvements. But really, none of these things are unappealing. So a little bit of preference for just general accessibility and shared space on the streets.
And just a nod, you know, if we wanna be a bikeable community, it is all the better to plan for that now and start putting that in, because it is much more challenging in a build-out city. We just did one of the only 3 dedicated bike lanes in Provo on a very busy street, and so you have all of the backlash that comes with trying to redefine a street that has been defined for so many years. So we have the fantastic opportunity of putting that in place and that expectation in place right now on all of these busy streets, and it will just save headaches for the councils to come.
Well,
And
that's
it
part of-
establish us as that kind of community.
Yeah, it's part of establishing that culture shift.
Yes.
So if you make it a priority now, then it provides the opportunity for those who are interested in that mode of transportation.
To locate here.
Yeah, exactly.
And it makes sense for us.
Yep. And then looking at, again, what might motivate residents to use express bus or light rail service when it becomes available in Harriman. We asked them under which of these conditions they would ride express bus and or light rail. The top 2, again, were about accessibility. So if I could drive and use a park and ride lot near the station, or if it were within a 5 to 10 minute walk from my home, those things are the most important determining or motivating factors to drive resident use of transit or future transit facilities.
Wait,
This and
what they're
ride.
saying is we need a station in Harriman so people can get to it, shocker.
Yeah. Crazy, I know.
How about 2 or 3?
And they use transit more frequently.
I think we were gonna engage the fire department.
That's illegal.
Oh, I would.
Game on. Game on. I would waive off of
We
that.
asked residents if any of the following additional types of events or cultural activities would be of interest to them. 80% say that they would be interested in seeing a farmer's market in the city. 55% would be interested in some sort of food festival. 39% in a street fair. Those are the most popular options provided. And those results basically hold by council district as well. So farmers markets are most popular across all 4 council districts. Food festivals, slightly less popular idea in District 2, but then most of these are slightly less popular in District 2. Block parties, slightly more popular in District 2. So interesting, not quite a shift in priorities, but just a little bit of variation there. And that's all the information I have for you today, so I will turn the time back over to Susie to talk about what that means for the general plan.
If she can get close enough, cause this is as far as it goes.
Okay. We're working on bringing in our.
What's that?
Oh, yeah.
Looks like an obvious bit.
Here.
Yeah.
Great game
Hundred
before it.
Yearman, yeah.
Great game before it.
Sometimes you have to restart.
Is it on the front?
Not
one,
detecting any video.
Yeah. Sometimes I
John?
found
You
you
can,
had.
we did the
Oh,
extra
there we go.
8-inch push
Go.
into it, so.
Sorry.
So,
Sometimes it
so
extends your screen.
you have to back out and then relaunch that, yeah, after you've connected.
We go.
So we just wanted to follow up on the survey and sort of where we're heading with the general plan. And I think the kind of the mantra Michael and I have been talking about through the process is just how can we make the general plan matter? Both to the residents and also to you as a decision-making body and the planning commission. We were at the joint meeting last week, and I think the discussions with the with the developers, there was really interesting conversation, and it was kind of all over the place, and it was back and forth. And one of the things that Michael and I were talking about is, is there a way for the general plan to provide a more structured framework for those discussions and those decisions? And when you're talking about future land use map and future land use categories and whether or not developments are mattering or matching the value and the visions, that's what we're looking to create in the general plan. And so with the survey questions that Kyrene went through, we're trying to differentiate what might fit in one neighborhood but not another, help to sort of break it down into those sub areas and neighborhoods of Harriman so that we can make recommendations for that future land use map and updates that still match the vision and the priorities of the council, but are also matching those variations in neighborhoods. And recognizing that as Harriman grows, we'll still see even probably like more differences as those neighborhoods fill in with the different types of housing. Are there any questions regarding that survey and sort of our next steps and what we're trying to do with that information that I can clarify?
Well, and I apologize because I'm probably asking a question you already hit, so I
That's
apologize
okay.
for coming in late. With this, we're always talking about the component of education as to best uses of land as well, right? Because just asking what you want in your neighborhood does not tell the true picture of what makes sense in their neighborhood as well, or what doesn't make sense. And access to transportation corridors and all of those things that necessitate a different look than what they may or may not want. So I think just always weaving in the reality check of what just are good land use practices, and then of course, always the feedback that comes with that. But there's gonna be things that they want that just simply don't make sense. And if you're asking them a question that you can't truly ever give, that to me, that's disingenuous. So I think we have to be honest about the realities of each area and then ask a question that makes sense, or you're setting everybody up for failure. If I'm just saying, what do you want, and I know that's never going to make sense there, then why should I shouldn't even ask the question.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
That's
Because
kind of
I
what we
see
discussed.
frustration
We
with the
discussed-
same thing, and I think most residents is just that, it's like,
Yeah.
this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, we discussed that last time you presented this, exact same thing came up. Please don't let them think that, oh, see this big empty piece of ground, what do you want there, when it's already entitled, to make sure that those maps that they created for us have been part of their open house so people understand that it's not even, doesn't matter.
Because that's how you lose the trust of your residents, when you're asking questions and it's just window dressing and they know it and they can sense it. So, and I love the feedback component, but it's gotta be substantial within the realm in which they can have a say. So just a cautionary tale.
Yeah, thanks, that's a great comment. So at last week's meeting, we did that one question survey about the priorities. So trying to get into what are some decision-making factors and how they are prioritized both by the city council and residents. With the residents, we've been doing it as a dot exercise at a couple of different events. We had it at a workshop. Michael had it at the Harriman Howell, where it was I think, getting a little dark, and some of the colored dots might not have gotten where they were supposed to. But really, really good input and feedback, and I think what we're wanting to work with you today is take it to that next step of understanding what each of these decision-making factors comprises. You know, when you're talking about economic opportunities, that's a little bit more obvious than, you know, quality of life or community character. So the ranking, you know, from you as a group that we did it with last week, quality of life was the top factor. And at our open house on Wednesday, we actually had some really great feedback from a few people that said, well, really, you know, when I'm looking at these options, quality of life is kind of that umbrella term that captures the other 6 factors. So, you know, if we've got all of those covered, you know, then together are we creating a good quality of life for Harriman residents? So that might be a direction we take it from here. But what I'd like to do today, and assuming everybody has their phone, we've set up a survey, an interactive survey and polling online to ask questions about, you know, list things that mean economic opportunities for Harriman, and then any metrics that we can start to use to evaluate whether or not, you know, projects or the direction the city's headed can be measured, so that when you're having these decision-making discussions, there's a little bit more framework for kind of going through a list and being able to say, it's like, all right, are we meeting our economic opportunity metrics? Are we meeting employment opportunities? And understanding that there's going to be some prioritization of those. So it's loading. This is just the test question to make sure everybody can interact with the online survey.
One snooze fine, two snoozers.
Maybe a higher speed internet connection. Quality of life.
We've been hearing, fiber, yeah.
Nope.
You are right on the cusp, my friend, right on the cusp.
Okay.
I've never seen that. Although I don't know if it'll actually connect.
Okay. So I think so the test question was really favorite animal, cat, dog, or horse, just to test it. But what we're going to do is go through a series of questions. So for each of those 7 things, this is just, and we can use this as the test. So this is the same question that we did last week. But if you weren't there, and maybe even just to kind of confirm our results, if anything's changed between last week and this week for you, to type in that code, and it should go to that Mentimeter, and bring up the
Okay, so you want us to start putting those in?
Yeah, so when you go into the Menti.com and use that code, you'll be able to choose the order, you know, whatever is your first choice, and then it'll remove that one and let you just go through and choose each of them. And if anybody chooses other, we didn't have time to talk about this last week, but we'd be curious to know what that is for you. All right.
Oh, look at going back and forth.
I know.
Start moving things around just a mess.
And you can see down in the corner, it'll show how many people are voting.
Made an impact there.
Yeah. Your vote matters. That's what it means.
I feel like some of those, see, quality of life, transportation, community amenities, that's all part of quality.
Yeah, we talked about that. You might have stepped out, but that was sort of the discussion. But you're right on target, so good.
Exactly. We'll have no quality of life if we can't afford anything, so economic development is super important.
Yeah, and that was another discussion at the open house on Wednesday is, you know, if we bring in economic opportunities, then the community amenities, that
They
people are
grow
saying
as
they
a
want,
result.
you're gonna be able to have those because the city is more, physically balanced and stable, so. And I think, people understand that too, so.
But that's one of those little nuggets of education that is so fundamentally important is we need constant revenue streams that are not one time in order to do all of these other priorities that you want. So that is a consistent message point that has to precede everything, is once our one-time revenues are down, what is our plan? So economic development for me, always number one. And then, I'm sharing, but then transportation. If nobody can get anywhere, we have no quality of life. So again, anyway, all of these just important information, I think.
Yeah, I agree though that it's very much the umbrella, quality of life is just the umbrella of mythology.
Which fundamentally means nothing unless you define it, yeah, for sure.
That's what we have you for.
That's what you have all of you for. And I get that, I start to
See,
troll,
now she can be
get
an
back on,
informed
start to
citizen.
troll.
Well, when I was on the council,
Back in the day.
I'm waiting to hear that for the first time.
No.
I was there.
Steve. Yeah, you just wait. You just wait, my friend.
She's been building, it's been building up for 4 years for her.
No,
telling you, it's not
I'm
too
all
long.
rah-rah. I know what it's all
So
about.
we're up to 16, are there still a couple people that are working on it, or can we move on to the next one?
Go for
Yes.
it.
Same as mine, it's pretty much.
It's all good, go for it. I don't think it's gonna change much.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I think this is
If you weren't
similar
fast enough, your opinion doesn't count.
to what we had with the last one. I feel like employment opportunities and community amenities might have been switched, but I think we're still in good shape. So now,
Stop working.
that's good. Okay, so now, the next code. So now we're looking to further define these decision-making factors for Ehrman. So, like I said, economic opportunities is a little bit more obvious than some, we're talking about jobs and retail. But anything that's more specific.
You and I are stuck in the same place. We're stuck.
I know, where do you go?
Oh geez, it's user error apparently.
Just go back.
Just hit back button. Oh, and then a code, okay.
Yeah, sorry, it is, the app is a little, touchy, but it's, we're still getting to here, so just, there'll be a new code for each of the decision-making factors, because you can have two questions with each code.
I'm not sure I understand.
What are we getting at with this one? Sorry.
So to define, like, when you're talking about economic opportunities, just words or phrases, what does it mean? I mean, it could be as simple as
Revenue?
retail or
Revenue? Tax revenue?
money.
Right.
Yeah. Anything, it's so open-ended, just anything that defines economic opportunities for you.
The cat in the hat.
Yeah.
Come on, people.
Yeah.
Take this seriously. Is that you, Clint?
No.
Listen, did you pick me right off the get-go?
I'm not comfortable with the fact that the cat in the hat has the same size as my visibility, which seems far more important to economic development. I feel like mine has now been pushed down in importance.
You've learned something today.
So,
Great.
Hey, lunch is here, so while we're kind of where we just shove that way and we continue to talk and send it, council here on that timeline.
One more difference.
Sorry for diversity of choice.
Super dense.
Like,
We need to change the pin. Is it downstairs, Brad, or is it right here?
3:30 to go to St. George.
Getting, this is really.
Explanation of this question, otherwise I don't see that. It's flat against the wall. Yeah, I mean, who knows what you're thinking.
Hang on. So you say lunch, I heard lunch.
Like I heard I'm thinking about what's gonna happen.
Okay, yeah.
I feel like we did this last time. I did not.
Huh?
I feel like we had this whole conversation last time. Yes, we did. What's that?
on some different.
Alright, I think we're good to get going again.
Okay. So I know we wanna get out of here by 1, and so we might just do a couple of these, and then we'll have Michael send out the others. So we've got the 2 questions for each of those decision-making factors. So the first one was just asking you to define what economic opportunities means for Sherman. The second question in each of these sets is looking at specific metrics or measures. So, for economic opportunities, it could be that retail sales tax. It could be, number of stores. So anything that can either quantitatively or qualitatively define whether or not you're progressing or meeting some of those target goals for economic opportunities.
So how do we wanna measure
Yeah.
economic growth or opportunity?
So we're doing this on full thing then?
Yeah, so this one, so each of the factors has its own code, so this is still that same code that you were in before, the 21, 30, 61. And
We do this one?
I like yours. And are you asking us to do this again?
so these are the metrics, so any evaluation measures.
I feel like a lot of these are all the same thing.
It could be, yeah, I mean, for some of them, it's,
Property tax growth, tax revenue, sales tax growth, revenue, sales tax.
Keep on doing something.
Apparently not.
Math.
Math, I love math.
Dr. Seuss did not make an appearance this time though.
But I was thinking Cat in the Hat was a good thing because I just read the one little book where he comes in, the kids are a rainy day, they have no idea what to do, they can't think outside of their box, and he comes in with thing 1 and thing 2 that comes up with all different kinds of things that they can do and have fun. So we can apply the same thing to economic development. We
thinking
can come
outside the
with
box.
all different kinds of things that we could do to be successful and have fun and make things good. So the Cat in the Hat was a good comment.
Yeah.
That sounds like that was a confession there, Sherry.
I really honestly did not.
Reading between the lines.
But when I read that, I was like, oh, that's cool. Cause I just barely read the thing 1 and thing 2 book. That is not my normal nighttime reading.
We know.
It's my normal nighttime reading.
Before my first didn't get up there.
Last night it was the gingerbread cupcake, so.
There you go.
Get out here. Get out here, you gotta. Just go to the special.
That's what we have you for.
Which gets raising the bar or
Chain.
or credit union, clearly we weren't looking for variety in financial institutions.
The chain liquor store.
Gonna be the next.
Don't mess with my liquor store, that's a nice liquor store.
It is a nice one. That's unique. That's unique. In style anyway.
That's why our technology is.
That's true. Dramatically. only saw was District 3, wasn't it?
Right.
It's all District 3.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next one, it's a new code, so 893917. And now we're talking about what defines a reflexive community character for Huron. And then the second half will be the metrics to evaluate. And then I'd also like your feedback just on this platform, the Mentimeter, and how you like it compared to other online polling or survey tools.
Yours working?
For some reason,
Oh, this goes block
Did it
three, unlock
refresh?
it, Susie.
Yeah.
I just hit refresh on my
89.
maybe I need to do that. That I didn't try.
8939.
I guess, why can't we see on the phone?
Refresh is the key on that one, right?
The Yeti Beta. Wonder who that was.
There were a lot of people who got comments. Talking about Yeti socks, because there's people who are not.
I don't have Yeti socks. Just saying.
They're at the in group, huh?
I think that's gonna have, that's gonna have to be our departing gift to Nicole, is a pair of Yeti socks. Just saying.
Yeah, 2 pairs.
They go well with high heels.
They go well with high heels. I could just see her down in Provo during a press conference. I scroll down and see her socks. It'd be fantastic. I'd like that.
Or you put the Yeti.
You don't know this is all right.
Okay, we're gonna move on to the metrics. If you are still doing the other one, it'll log it.
Alright.
Line.
I'm gonna have to ask, why do you have pictures of dogs, cats?
That was supposed to be the intro slide.
Oh, yeah.
Easily.
That was the test slide, was the dog, horse, cat.
Oh.
We're supposed to pick your favorite animal, make sure it was working for you. And that's the one that didn't work. it wasn't working well within the PowerPoint cabin, so luckily I don't have anything more compromising on my downloads.
Cleaning its hands.
Another question.
A lot of it.
I was on totally the wrong book apparently.
Sam I am.
There could be lessons involved.
I'm gonna change my answer to that.
I'm just gonna guess somebody was going for a Memorial Day breakfast there. They may have gotten some green eggs.
It's only if the cops were cooking.
Yeah, what happened?
Our eggs are
We
blue.
What happened? We were in charge.
As a fact, we do not specialize in cooking. We have a staff. It's really hard for you guys to recognize anything that doesn't have a hole in the middle of it.
That's food.
That's food, right? Wait, what is that?
That's got sugar on it, so let's eat it.
Pancake, what is that? Oh! That's food. Me hungry. That's why we always request our pancakes with holes in them.
Crime rates, that's gotta be a call.
Well, apparently it was more than one person.
There's two cases here. I haven't done it, but I've just been texting. Mine is on there, no outliers.
Oh, I'm a fan of statistics. I don't know what that is, but
I'm a fan of all they can do.
I don't wanna put math up there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we probably got
Yeah.
this one. Yeah.
43 minutes in counting.
Okay, so, we're gonna jump to talking about the potential annexation areas, and then we'll send out the codes for the rest of those decision-making factors, just to get some feedback that we can start to sit down and work with. But I wanted to do that exercise first because as we're talking not only about the development proposals that come into the current city boundaries, you know, how do those decision-making factors inform, you know, what we put in the general plan and how you make decisions going forward about the potential annexation areas on the west and northwest side. So we just wanted to give an update about conversations we've been having. Michael and I met with Salt Lake County Regional Planning probably about 3 weeks ago, just to kind of go into the county and, you know, let them know that Harriman's doing the general plan update, and the annexation areas are part of that discussion. And essentially wanted to make sure that we knew what conversations were being had between these property owners and the county, and to just make sure that we weren't caught off guard with what information we're putting in the general plan. So we got a little bit of an update on, you know, the current Olympia Hills proposal, and they are working, you know, with a couple of different groups, consultants, to update and tweak their plan. They also are working with Salt Lake County Regional Planning, is working to put together a form-based code to essentially provide a framework for development in that Olympia Hills area. And I think it's probably in the next month or two that they are looking to come back to the county with an updated proposal. And I think it was our understanding that the county was looking to possibly approve up to 1,000 units while it's still unincorporated. Salt Lake County. But the idea is that Olympia Hills will either annex into an existing city or form their own municipality, after they build more than 1,000 units over on that land. We're still looking to follow up with Doug Young and his group and have a bigger conversation. But we have had a conversation with Rio Tinto Kennecott just earlier this week. Benj Becker from Science Public Finance and I talked to him for probably an hour and just got an update on where they are with their areas. And they're calling, they have two separate areas that they're looking at. The one is what's currently in your future land use map, designated as that light industrial business park area, primarily up on the northwest, just north of, is that 126? Yeah. So that area, based on our current conversation, they are probably looking to start doing their environmental studies in the next year or two. Until they do those environmental studies, they won't have any specific land use plans as far as what is going where more specifically. But they did give us some general breakdown, and they are essentially looking at this area as a planned community. So similar to what they've been doing in Daybreak and Daybreak West, with a combination of residential and then sort of an equal distribution of some office, some retail, and some light industrial. It's about, I think, 900 acres. It's about a quarter the size of the whole Daybreak community, and so similar breakdown, but probably just a quarter of the square footage. And I think that was about 2.5 million square feet of offices that what they're looking at. The residential, similar density overall. Think about 5 to 5.5 dwelling units per acre. And after those environmental studies are done and they can understand what they can do where, that it might be 10 years when they start to look at actually moving forward with development. The other area that they are looking at is on the west side of the Box Highway. And basically, he was saying similar configuration, but they thought that their idea would be on this one that's adjacent to Harriman, that would probably be residential more on the east side to blend in with the other residential neighborhoods that are in Harriman and South Jordan, and then looking at more of the light industrial towards the Bacchus Highway side. Any of the development on the west side, they would probably flip that so that the industrial would be along the highway and the residential would be up in the foothills. So probably a different type of development pattern, looking at more of a clustered foothill open space preservation configuration. So those are the conversations that we've had. And as we've been telling the public at the open houses and the meetings that this area is going to impact Harriman, whether it's annexed into the city or not. But the potential for looking to annex it brings the benefits. And some of those, we just went through with those economic opportunities for if there is commercial, if there is office and jobs out there, it's bringing in the revenue, it's bringing in potential jobs, and it's potentially diversifying the housing stock. There are, of course, the transportation constraints and what the timing of those improvements are related to that development.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but another cool point, I think, or a good point to make in those types of interactions with the community is, and it also doesn't bring school children. Because that's a big thing that we hear a lot is our schools are overcrowded, and they come to us about that, which is really not our decision about how many schools to build.
Mm-hmm.
But if that becomes like industrial, it doesn't bring with it more pressure on our school district either. It brings jobs, it brings all the things you mentioned, but it also doesn't create a further burden on the school system.
Yeah, balance
Yeah.
the whole community.
Yeah.
It brings in the daytime population we don't have.
And like I talked the other day, it's a different tax base, it's property tax to help all those, the other entities that are funded by property taxes still provides franchise tax and very little services.
Yep.
So I think, some of the residents, they're like, oh, well, we had heard that Kennecott wanted to, just use that land as a buffer between residential neighborhoods and cities and their operations. And sounds like their timeline has probably accelerated for keeping those mining areas active, and so they are looking at, what those areas can be as future planned communities. And just wanted to make sure that as part of our general plan process, that we're looking at it and also, representing kind of the reality of what these property owners are looking at, so that we're not sort of being disingenuous with the general plan, saying it's like, well, we want to have it this, but if the property owners, have a completely different vision, what we don't want to do is create a situation where they're going to say, okay, we're going to work with South Jordan instead. And so, they have been having conversations with South Jordan. They recently, and I think they're still in the general plan update process as well. And so just knowing that they are having conversations, with Harriman, with South Jordan, and with Salt Lake County, and just keeping the ideas coming and understanding both the benefits and the impacts of these annexation areas.
Thank you.
I think those are great comments and sharing. Did anybody else have any other thoughts that they want us to take into the discussions regarding the annexation areas? I think because the configuration is not decided, even though on this one, Olympia Hills is kind of shown, broken down into more specific land use subcategories, because Rio Tinto doesn't feel like they're there, what we'll probably look at is just giving it a land use category that is planned community and trying to describe what the configuration of that planned community is, rather than trying to represent it as a particular residential might go here, there's going to be parks here. We might be able to show kind of that residential on the east half and the industrial, retail, commercial on the west half. But I don't want to get too specific on this future land use map if we don't have that information that's been vetted with the property owners. So that's sort of what we're looking at right now. And I would also say that, so Rio Tinto, so Jeff Stevenson is the contact with Rio Tinto. He said that he and Doug Young, they probably talk once or twice a month, so they are also in, communication with each other about the ideas and potential for those two properties, because I think there is some trade-off that, if Rio Tinto is looking to do more commercial and office on their side, that maybe more of the residential is on the south side in the Olympia Hills area. So that's something that could play out, just knowing, what the different distribution of those land uses are. I think, they acknowledge that transportation is a constraint. They said, well, what are your thoughts on the transportation infrastructure that's needed to make these communities successful, both in regard to road infrastructure as well as transit. And it was kind of we just need to upgrade 118th, 126th, and 134th to allow for more traffic and volume. And that's, of course, one of those easier said than done. And he wasn't just talking through Harriman, but connecting over to Mountain View, connecting on over to Bangor and I-15. And,
So
I think
given
that's
the
just
time, I'd like to wrap up a few things with this. One, I've heard pretty clear from a lot of our council, since the planning commission and combined council meeting, that possibly, yes, a little bit concerned about some of the questions were asked in the last survey. Maybe launching out another survey for the public and make sure we get this right, so we're not gonna be in a hurry to get it right, right?
Right.
So what I would like to recommend, possibly, sometimes it's hard to get the council to give us some feedback without giving you something to feed off of. And so if you have some ideas what kind of type of questions you'd like to ask that you think you'd like to pull away from us, community survey, we'd like to hear from you. That'd be helpful. And we will, as staff, circle up and try to give a few more and then feed it back to consultant, and then we can put it in a format, and then before we launch it this time, you'll get to review it again, say, hey, yeah, I like the direction this is going, and then we'll launch it. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
That sounds good, and I would just add just some level of specificity that guides this a little bit. So a little less broad on some of these, just because they're so broad that the answers coming in, I think, become moot. So I would just like to see a little more specificity in some of them to drive to what we're looking for. Otherwise, I think that the disparate answers become unhelpful.
I think just overall concept needs to be different. This isn't a blank canvas. We're saying, what would you like community to be? Almost all of that's decided already.
Yeah. Hence the specificity.
Whether it's been built or it's entitled, like those decisions have already been made. You can't change them. So leading people to think they can change them is just frustrating.
And the pre-education, so, you know, adding a sentence or two in that sets the stage to what is already decided, and then a specified question that gets to something that is useful for us.
This general plan is about what's left. So focus on what's left and what we can do to affect the things we need in those areas to balance out what we already have.
I agree, and you said something about what's needed too, and I think it's really important to understand that we have that annexation declaration area with the last holdout and with the Kennecott. There's no guarantee that is gonna come to our city, and so I think we have to really be micro-focused on what is in our city and what those needs are, and how do we fill those needs with what currently is in our city. Hoping those things come to add to that, but we have to be very, very careful about not losing any potential parcels to fill those needs by thinking this other will come. You know what I mean? So really understanding what those needs are and addressing the needs, so we don't lose those opportunities.
All we have really left is some potential, haven't seen all the plans, but they're in a master development. You have very little, yeah, there is some spots gonna be infill properties. And they actually, those become more complicated, how to get developed those versus bigger parcels, so comment's good, we'll factor that in, but I think December, whatever, 11th, is it? Council meeting, we'd like to go through the contamination soils thing, and maybe have a list of questions that might be on that, so we can get those things too done. And I would like to just take 5 minutes, and we've been trying to fill in for Tammy a little bit on legislative updates for how we approach our legislators this cycle, because we're already gonna start reaching out to them and trying to set up time with them before legislation season kicks off fully, even though they've really not come out of it. They've been pretty busy almost year round this year, and try to make sure we get some nods on those priorities. And I know Cody went out and grabbed the packets. I excused Tammy, she had something come up as you noticed, and she's not gonna make it back in time. We wish her best right now, as we all deal with issues in our lives, right? So, sorry to cut you off, it's just, I've been directed very clearly that we got a deadline, which I don't like. You always have a start time, you have an end time. Maybe like a little bit more.
But I would say that, like, just because you've got master development agreements and you've got most of the city subdivided, if things change, and I think you just want to just never stop planning. Don't assume because it's planned now that it might not change, or developers might not come in with a request to change their master development agreement because there's new realities in the economy or the market. And I think it's just it's prudent to stay current on planning and thinking of new ideas, so that you're ready to change in a way that meets your vision and values, to take that to the community.
Awesome, thank you so much, we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Alright. Give it to us in 7 minutes.
Well, Brett gave me 5, so, sorry, I'm not Tammy, so you're gonna have to deal with a certain less enthusiastic version. But we'll try to breeze through some of this real quick. The purpose of this is just to kind of give you a 30,000 foot level of what we have been working on and focusing on as we meet with our lobbyists and with our state representatives on the Hill leading up to the 2020 legislative session. A couple of quick highlights that you have in your handout that Tammy wanted to discuss. One is the implementation of Senate Bill 72 from the 2019 session, which is an administrative rule involving UDOT, and Blake is not in here, but he'll probably talk about this a lot better than I could. Essentially what this is a complete revamping of UDOT's rule regarding prioritization of transportation infrastructure projects. They did away with the old point system, assigning priority numbers of 1 through 15 or whatever, and then funding them based off their priority number. Did away with all of that and have implemented what they believe is a more transparent way of assigning priority transportation infrastructure projects. The previous rule required maintenance of current infrastructure to be prioritized over new projects. That piece has gone away as well. And they've moved to really a focus on TIF projects and T-TIF projects, with the ability for local municipalities to submit project recommendations to UDOT that follow a certain set of guidelines, and as long as we meet certain parameters within our request, we have the ability to really kind of push some projects that we feel are our priority, as opposed to being constrained by UDOT's old rules. So this is a good thing for us, moving in a positive direction that we feel, and Blake obviously is more versed in that than I am, and that may pop up as we start to look at some of the transportation infrastructure projects that we've been talking about on Main Street, 118, 134, Juniper Crest, and some of these other capital projects that we've been discussing. Hoping that this helps us out. So, questions on that one? The other big one that's coming up that most of you are probably paying attention to is tax reform, the Tax Restructuring Equalization Task Force. That's a bill that's being run by House and Senate leadership, or actually a series of bills through the task force to overhaul the tax system, tax code in the state of Utah. Just some quick highlights if you look through the first couple of pages on that. The idea is to kind of remove some of the constitutional restraints on things such as the income tax, to provide for better access to funding mechanisms for transportation projects and some other priorities that the legislature has. Couple of highlight points where they say that the family of four, $60,000 a year would see an estimated average total tax reduction of more than $400. Keep in mind that that's total tax reduction. That's not just what you submit to the state on your tax returns. That's everything. So your sales tax, your fuel tax, whatever the taxes that you as an individual or a family pay to the state for various services, the total tax reduction is estimated at about $400. So just to try and keep some of that in perspective. It does include a higher sales tax rate on food, but really again the idea is to inject some flexibility into the use of those funding mechanisms. So that's obviously something that we're following very closely and we'll keep an eye on.
Do we have any of our lobbyists that are at least in some subtle way gonna talk about the radius on auto zones, automall zones? I mean, what is the strategy?
We're meeting with the automotive lobbyist on Wednesday. They are proposing a change right now, and those only can go through if they back. So we are meeting, what's that?
But it's my understanding it's not enough.
If the auto dealership lobbyist is working on some radius stuff, if they back it, it'll work. If they don't back it, we're talking through some additional details.
I assumed there was a subtle strategy to do that, given our
We're
previous
meeting with them on
conversations.
Wednesday, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're good. It's a good question. So, again, tax reform, that's gonna be a moving target for the next 4 months and certainly through the session. So if you have any questions or specific inputs that you'd like us to provide as we meet with Chris Blake and some of our other lobbyists in anticipation of the 2020 session, let us know. Some other quick highlight points is, I think my 5 minutes is almost up. Some bills that are in committee, or at least bill files that are open related to contaminated soils and reclamation. Obviously, we have an interest in state educational facilities out here. That's something that is being discussed in various forms right now. Water quality and changes to some of the municipal water resources. That's something that Justin's obviously following very closely, and we'll keep an eye on. Some modifications to trails and open space preservation that we're hoping to take advantage of.
The local control issue is certainly alive and well in discussion, not only for things like zoning, but also for municipal fees, including impact fees. There are a couple of discussions being had right now on some of those that we'll keep an eye on. Some revisions to election code, including plurality voting and some of the other ballot and voter information stuff. Our historical area preservation, which we just talked about, we're certainly hoping to leverage some of our state partners to help us accomplish that, and some code amendments in building and construction. Those are our legislative priorities as we've sat and discussed going into the 2020 session. We're meeting with our new House rep, Representative Candace Perucci, on Thursday, and try to outline some of these with her as well. And then our next interim session is on November 20th, where obviously the tax revision is being discussed amongst some other topics. So, anything else you guys have questions on or priorities? That's it. Sorry, Brett, it was 6.5.
How about?
I will accept an emotion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we're done.